Hannah, I cooked your family together today. As your husband, please don't mess up the cooking. I'm expecting great hospitality. Roy, thanks, but I just had twins and came back from the hospital. It would have been nice if you considered that. What? Talking back to me, it doesn't matter that you just had babies. Having kids is what a wife should do. Don't use giving birth as an excuse. Just cook quietly. 1 week after leaving the hospital with the twins, Roy invited 15 family members to his parents' house to celebrate. I should be happy, but it seems he wants to take advantage of me after giving birth. I was really tired of my husband's behavior. I wanted to throw my phone at him, but I didn't want to ruin everything. So I calmly said, I'll start preparing everything now, but I'll need your parents' help. Getting help from my parents? Not possible. They're working in another country. Yes, as my husband mentioned, his parents couldn't come to today's family event because they're abroad. He seemed to think less of me, but he didn't know everything. I was already planning my revenge. After a quick chuckle, I went outside and returned to my in-laws' house in 5 minutes. Roy was surprised and asked, Hannah, who are these people? I don't know them. Why are you bringing strangers here? It was no wonder he was shocked. These two weren't family, but they were related to him. Let me introduce Ben and Claire. They're helping with today's preparations. You must be Roy. We've been looking forward to meeting you. We know a lot about you. Looking forward to meeting me. But both Ben and Claire seemed serious, despite being polite. They gave my husband icy stares. Confused, Roy whispered to me, Come here for a moment, Hannah. He took me to a quiet place, looking confused. He demanded, What are you doing? It's crazy to invite strangers without asking me. How will you explain this to everyone? There's no time. Get rid of them and start cooking now. Like always, he tried to scare me with his tough talk. But today, I wasn't going to let him win. I stared back at him, sure of myself. No need to worry. Everything's set. Actually, I'm planning to confront you with your mistress's parents here. What? My mistress's parents? Them? Roy, you said they were strangers, outsiders, but that's because you didn't know. I do. I kept calm, just telling the truth. Roy was shocked and then got angry. What you mean by my mistress's parents? I haven't cheated, and why are you acting like this? Are you disrespecting me? He got louder and raised his fist. It was so loud that the family might hear. It was clear he wasn't calm. What's happening, Roy? I heard shouting. Is everything okay? Oh, it's nothing, just a little argument with the wife. She's stressed because of the babies, he said, forcing a smile and hinting for me to leave. What a weak man. I followed his orders for so long, but not anymore. I went back to the living room where everyone was. After a big breath, I started my comeback. Here we go. Roy, you'll regret this. Everyone, thanks for coming today. I have something to say. I'm divorcing Roy. The happy mood disappeared in a flash. What? People were confused in my in-laws' house. But I kept smiling. You've all been fooled by Roy. He's not the good guy you think. He's a coward who bullies his wife secretly. He looks good outside, so you didn't notice. I found out just a year ago. People whispered, but Roy's uncle stood up. What's happening, Hannah? Divorcing right after having babies? And it's hard to believe Roy would trick us. He even said he was cooking for you today. I'm sorry for surprising you, but I'm just telling the truth. When I got pregnant, Roy changed. He made me work hard even though I was pregnant. Even today, he wanted me to cook. He's always lying. I looked at Roy. He looked blank. It seemed like he was trying to hide his true self. But I knew what he was thinking. Don't say too much. You know what will happen later, his face seemed to say, even though he looked angry but blank. But I kept talking. Roy kept telling me that it's normal for a wife to get pregnant and have babies. I work and provide for you, he'd say. He used these words to treat me badly. He never showed this side of him before we got married. His parents and our relatives looked surprised, but they knew I wasn't joking. So confusion spread. Then Roy stepped forward. He took a deep breath and forced a smile. It seems there's a misunderstanding. I'm not perfect. Maybe I've been too harsh to my wife. But I've taken care of her a lot. Unfortunately, she only remembers the bad things, and what she's saying isn't true. Maybe she's not thinking clearly after having the babies. I wish I could have supported her better as a husband. As Roy gave a sad smile, the relatives felt sorry for him. He's so good at looking good, I thought, but not anymore. You're really good at winning people over. No wonder you're important at your dad's company, someone said. Hannah, I know you're upset, but it's not right to confuse everyone like this. Let's talk calmly later. Roy held my hand gently, trying to stop me, but I looked at a corner, signaling what to do next. The couple stood up. No need for that. Look at these photos, they said. What? You're still here. And what are those photos? They showed the relatives some pictures. The relatives were surprised to see these strangers but still looked at the photos. Suddenly, they gasped in horror. Hey Roy, what's going on? Explain this so I understand. Let me see those photos, I said, taking the photos from his uncle. Roy was silent, looking shocked. The photos showed his cheating, something he never wanted anyone to know. These photos prove Roy's been cheating on me. I knew about his affairs before I went to the hospital and gathered evidence. But I couldn't investigate much while pregnant, so I asked his mistress's parents for help. I'm Ben, and this is my wife Claire. We're sorry to disrupt the gathering, but we had to clear our daughter's name. Hannah, our daughter Rachel, worked with Roy. She got the job after a lot of effort and was excited to go to work every day. But Roy hurt her deeply, Ben said, his voice filled with emotion. Claire choked up and Ben put his hand on her shoulder, leering at my husband. Rachel told us she met a great guy. She was born when my wife was 40, so you can imagine how happy we were. But to Roy, Rachel was just a fling. He lied about being single and fooled her even though she was much younger. When Rachel found out he was married, she got really depressed. We'll never forgive Roy. A silence filled the room. The relatives looked at the photos again and then turned to my husband. Their trust in him seemed to vanish. Hold on, are you all believing these old folks? Photos can be faked. They might just want money. We were surprised they're here too, but would they really lie at a family gathering? I can't believe this, my husband said. But if you're innocent, stay calm. And calling them old? That's not nice, I said, trying to calm him down. It was clear he was losing control, showing his true colors. Our plan was working and his panic showed it. Suddenly, someone slapped my husband. Everyone gasped, especially my husband, who looked shocked. Hey Roy, long time no see. Hi everyone, it's been a while, Mom, Dad. What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be overseas? There was something important, so we rushed back, my father-in-law said. Well, you came back just in time. Hannah's saying weird stuff. She's making everyone think I'm the bad guy. I didn't do anything wrong. She must be losing it, my husband said. But the in-laws just looked at him, not saying a word. You know, they talk about postpartum depression. Maybe you should go to the hospital, get checked out by specialists, and rest. Then you'll listen to me like before, my husband said, trying to convince them. He thought their silence meant they agreed. Looks like Mom and Dad get it. That's good. Oh, I'm thirsty. Hannah, water, he said. His mom quietly gave him a water bottle. He looked surprised but drank it anyway. Then my father-in-law dropped a bomb. Roy, you're fired from the company, he said. My husband spit out his water, shocked. A relative nearby frowned as he wiped his clothes. What, Dad? Why are you joking about this? Decide if it's a joke after looking at this. Is this a call on speaker? I'm the one who called. I had your parents listen from the start, everything on speaker. Why? Because I needed their help. As soon as I realized who you really are, I knew I had to tell them. Plus, I've recorded all the times you've treated me badly during my pregnancy. I let them hear it all. And today's conversation is recorded too. I played the recordings. The phone played our conversation. Roy, today, I've gathered our family for you as my wife. Don't embarrass me with your cooking. I'm expecting top-notch hospitality. Thank you, Roy, but you know I just gave birth to twins and was discharged from the hospital. A little consideration would have been nice. What? Talking back, it doesn't matter that you just gave birth. Besides, having children is a basic duty of a wife. Don't use postpartum as an excuse. Just cook quietly. When my husband insulted me, I really wanted to throw my phone at him. But I stopped myself because it would ruin everything. The reason I endured his insults was because I was recording them. I made sure the recording was on when I called my parents from my in-laws' house. You were recording, Hannah. Why were you sneaking around? Roy asked. I don't want to hear about sneaking around from someone who bullies his wife and cheats. And if I didn't do this, Roy would try to deny everything. I replied, Roy, we know everything. We came back secretly today. We listened to your statements on speakerphone and confirmed your true nature. My parents said, we didn't doubt you, Hannah, but as parents, we wanted to believe in Roy. And this is what happened. Now, it's your turn to explain. Why did you cheat, Hannah? when Roy was supporting you so well? As my father-in-law spoke, my husband seemed to lose his confidence. Working at his father-in-law's company, he saw him as an authority figure. He must have realized his father-in-law wouldn't accept any excuses. He started to speak hesitantly. I only got married to make you happy. Honestly, I never really wanted to get married. But I knew you were worried about my future. I thought marrying someone like Hannah would ease your concerns, he confessed. The in-laws and other relatives frowned and looked at him coldly. Feeling the tension, he quickly pleaded, "Please don't fire me. I'm an important asset to the company, right? If I'm fired, it'll cause chaos. I'll change, I promise. Please reconsider." As soon as he finished begging, there was a loud thud in the room. His father had slammed his fist down on the nearby table. "You scoundrel. After getting Hannah pregnant, you dared to play with the emotions of an innocent girl, pretending to be single. How dare you? Your presence only brings chaos to the company. I can't trust you to run it. I'm deeply disappointed in you. You act selfishly without caring about others' feelings. That's not how I raised you. Do you understand?" My father-in-law's voice was filled with anger and disappointment. "And you married just for appearances? How disgraceful. Don't think you can easily regain our trust. I'm cutting ties with you. Don't show your face here again." "What? But I've worked so hard. Are you serious?" My husband looked more hopeless than I'd ever seen him. I knew he'd put a lot of effort into the company. It was understandable for him to be shocked that it all amounted to nothing. But it was his own fault. He tried to play the victim, but he was the one who caused all of this. As he hung his head, I gave him a cold look and he immediately knelt before me. "Hannah, please talk to your parents too. If I lose my job, it'll be hard for both of us, right? I'll really change. Please help me, Hannah. We're still married." How convenient for you to play the husband card now. As I've already told everyone, I'm divorcing you. No matter how much you apologize, I can't forgive you. And they feel the same way, I said, looking at my parents. They nodded in agreement. He bit his lip and turned to them. "I'm really sorry for hurting your daughter. I'll apologize as many times as it takes." He kept apologizing, but they didn't agree. No matter what he said, we wouldn't forgive him right now. He was still hiding something terrible while saying sorry. He was still trying to trick us. "It's too bad, Roy. You're still pretending. If you'd been honest, things might have been different. But like I've said, we know everything now. There's no going back," I said, smirking. He looked at me, stunned. "Pretending? How can you say I'm not sincere?" "On what basis?" he asked, confused. "You embezzled company funds, didn't you? And then you used that money to hire thugs to threaten Rachel to keep her quiet about your true self. You wanted to silence her, right?" I accused. "You're crazy. I would never do something like that without proof. Making such wild accusations without evidence, that's absurd," he protested. "Your parents have been investigating and have proof. That's why they're here. I've also talked to Rachel herself. I even have the voice recorder she had. Should I play it now? It clearly records you threatening her," I said. He paled and nervously glanced at his parents-in-law. Their stares were icy. "Roy, stop fighting a losing battle. The truth will come out soon. This alone is enough for you to be fired," they said. Cheating is one thing, but embezzlement and blackmail change everything. I didn't know the extent of it all. "Roy, you always underestimated me. You thought I was useless. But with everyone's help, we've come this far. And I'll protect our baby. I won't let you manipulate me anymore," I declared. I made my final statement. "Listen carefully. I'm divorcing you. No amount of apology will change that. You'll also be paying child support. We'll seek damages from Roy too. Rachel's lost time can't be undone, so at least be sincere in compensating her." Wait. I don't have that kind of money. Can someone please help me?" Roy pleaded. He looked around, but received only cold stares. Slowly, one by one, the relatives began to leave, ignoring him completely. In just one day, he lost everything. Soon after, my divorce from Roy was finalized. I managed to secure almost the amount I hoped for in child support, which was a relief. They filed a lawsuit against Roy as promised, and the company conducted its investigation into the embezzlement. Roy found himself drowning in debt, seeking help from me, his parents-in-law, and other relatives. But no one offered assistance. With the news of his embezzlement spreading, no company would hire him. Eventually, he resorted to borrowing from payday lenders, struggling day by day to pay off his debts. My in-laws apologized to me once more, assuring me of their protection from Roy's harm. They promised to keep an eye on him and always support me. I'm incredibly grateful to them. Right now, the thought of marriage doesn't appeal to me, but if I ever reconsider, I'd want a partnership like theirs. That's how I feel. A few years later, the twins have grown up and started kindergarten, which has made a big difference in our lives. They even help with household chores now and support me in every way they can. I've completely cut ties with my ex-husband, but I still keep in touch with his parents. They introduced me to a company owned by a friend of theirs, the president of which is a single mother who raised her son alone. She's created a workplace that's supportive of single mothers. They've been understanding of my situation, offering flexible work arrangements. Rachel also works there. She's successfully reintegrated into society and is now a beloved figure in the office with her radiant smile. It's no surprise her parents stood by her. Seeing their dedication to their daughter, I have a lot to learn from them as a parent. Rachel is eager to repay her parents, and I'm also working hard every day to repay my in-laws' kindness. Though there are still challenges ahead, seeing my children's smiles instantly comforts me. I cherish every moment spent with them and am grateful to have them in my life amidst all the difficulties. Sometimes I think back to something my ex-husband used to say, that having children is just a wife's duty. But as I watch my children grow, I realize how extraordinary it all is. Pregnancy and childbirth are sacred and bring immense joy. While this experience has left deep scars, it has also taught me something valuable. For the sake of my children and myself, I want to keep moving forward and live life to the fullest.
Karen's dad is really wealthy. When he dies, Karen will get a lot of money. I think she might get around $100 million. Isn't that amazing? I'm so excited. When Karen gets her money, I hope she'll take me on a vacation. That would be so nice. Maybe I'll even ask her to buy me a car. James, what about you? I've always dreamed of getting a really fancy gaming computer. I wonder if Karen would buy me one. As they chatted excitedly, they didn't notice the look on my face. On the other side of the door, I held onto my purse tightly. My name is Karen. I met my husband James at a social club for people who work. We became friends quickly because we both liked the same things. We were happy together every day. One day, I got a surprising call from my mom. She said, "Karen, your dad has collapsed." What? My dad was always cheerful, cracking dad jokes, and he seemed healthy. He ran his own company smoothly. It was hard to believe he collapsed. Worried about him, I left home right away and took the next train to the hospital my mom mentioned. My dad was incredibly kind. Even with his busy schedule, he always made time to play with my brother and me. He was a wonderful father who loved carrying us on his shoulders. I remember how emotional he got when I read a letter to my parents at my wedding to James. It's a memory I'll never forget. So hearing that such a loving man collapsed was hard to believe. When I got to the hospital where my mom was waiting, she turned to me. "Mom, how's Dad? Is he okay? Karen, please stay calm and listen." My mom looked at my dad lying on the bed with his eyes closed as she explained. Dad had collapsed suddenly at work and was rushed to the hospital. Despite many tests, they couldn't find anything wrong, and they didn't know why he got sick. More tests might find out what's wrong, but they could also make Dad feel worse, my mom said. I've decided to stop the tests. It looks like your dad will have paralysis on one side of his body, so he's going to need a lot of care. Yeah, that's right. Even though she seemed worried, my mom stayed calm. My mom has decided to take care of Dad. I could feel my mom's strength, but I was also really sad that my dad wouldn't be the same. Just then, my brother burst into the room. "How's Dad?" he asked, out of breath. Mom explained Dad's condition to him, just like she did to me. "Mom, you can't take care of him alone. I'm nearby. I'll help." "Thank you, but focus on your own life. You have your own family to take care of." My brother agreed, saying, "I understand." My brother got married before me and now has a 4-year-old daughter. I'm the one with more free time since I don't have kids yet, but it takes me an hour by train to get home. Even though I'm far away and it'll take time, I won't leave everything to you and Mom. If anything changes with Dad, tell me right away." "Karen, did you tell John you're here?" my brother suddenly asked, reminding me that I had left the house without letting John know. Seeing my worried expression, my brother said, "You should call him. John must be worried." So I hurried out of the hospital room to find a quiet spot to call him. When John answered, he asked, "Karen, where are you?" I was so worried. Hearing John's voice calmed me, but I couldn't hold back my tears as I explained that my dad had collapsed and needed care. John was shocked. "Your lively dad." But he spoke gently to comfort me. I felt grateful to have married him. When I told him I was coming home, he said softly, "I'll make dinner. Just be careful on your way home." It seemed Dad would stay in the hospital tonight. My mom and brother were also heading home, so I decided to go home too. When I got home, John had prepared my favorite meal. It must have been tough. "Have something you love to cheer up," he said, pulling out a chair for me. His kindness brought tears to my eyes. John usually stays calm, but he's incredibly caring when I'm feeling down, which always touches me. After thanking him for his comfort, I went to bed early that day. The next morning, feeling a bit better, I told John that I wanted to help take care of my dad sometimes, and he agreed happily. Also, it turned out that John had informed his parents about my dad's condition, and they offered to help with chores while I was away. I was surprised and grateful to receive such support from John's family to assist with my dad's care. When I called to thank them, John's mom chuckled and said, "Your dad is like family to us. You don't need to worry about a thing." When John's parents arrived at our house with smiles on their faces, asking how they could help with chores, I was surprised. They, like John, are usually calm and composed. Before I got married, I thought they were a bit distant, but maybe I misunderstood them. I kept thanking my husband James and my in-laws for their support and for taking care of my dad. My dad used to talk a lot, but after the paralysis on his left side, he couldn't speak well. Luckily, he could still write since he was right-handed. He communicated with us by writing on a whiteboard. Even though he was mostly in bed, he lifted our spirits by drawing funny pictures and writing dad jokes. My brother also came to help, but it was mostly my sister-in-law who assisted. With her experience as a caregiver, she patiently taught my mom and me how to help Dad. We were worried that my sister-in-law might not want to take care of Dad since he's not her blood relative, but she didn't mind at all. She happily said, "Your dad has made me laugh so much. Now it's my turn to make him smile." Seeing her enthusiasm made me realize that my brother had married an amazing person. My brother may have a great spouse, but I'm not falling behind when it comes to having an amazing one myself. My whole in-law family supports me in taking care of my dad. Every time I go to help him, they ask how he's doing, and I'm really thankful for their care. But then I realized it might all be a misunderstanding, just by chance. One day, I left the house to go see my dad, but when I got to the station, I realized I forgot my wallet. Feeling annoyed with myself, I went back home. Usually, when I went to help my dad, my in-laws would pitch in with chores, so I thought they'd find it funny that I forgot my wallet. I went inside, got my wallet from my room, and went back to the front door. That's when I overheard a conversation between James and my in-laws in the living room. "So, Karen's dad isn't going to pass away anytime soon, huh? I'm getting tired of waiting." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stopped in my tracks, wondering if I misheard. Quietly, I tiptoed closer to the living room door and pressed my ear against it, listening carefully. "Anyway, how much do you think Karen will inherit when her dad passes away? It doesn't make sense for us to be nice to her unless we get a big share. Her dad is really rich. She's probably going to get more than 100 million, right?" Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait. When her dad passes, I hope Karen takes me on a vacation. That'd be nice. Maybe I'll ask her to buy me a car. "James, what do you want?" Their conversation filled the room with excitement. On my side of the door, they probably had no clue about the expression on my face. I gripped my wallet tightly, feeling a mix of anger, frustration, and sadness. Careful not to make a sound, I quietly left the house, my mind swirling with emotions. I headed straight to my parents' place. If I thought my in-laws were being unusually kind, now I realized it was all for the sake of money. My dad's inheritance was significant, but I couldn't bear the thought that my in-laws were eagerly waiting for his demise. Unable to clear my mind, I sat on a bench at the local station near my parents' house. The echoes of James and his family's laughter replayed in my head. I can't forgive them. Never. They're all foolish, just laughing away. I made a silent vow to seek revenge on James and my in-laws, who only saw dollar signs when they looked at my loving father. Despite hearing their greedy conversation, I played along, pretending I hadn't heard a thing whenever they asked about my father's health. I maintained my polite demeanor and thanked them as usual. I decided to take advantage of James and my money-hungry in-laws as much as possible. I spent more time caring for my father and dumped household chores on them without hesitation. My in-laws, eager for their share of the inheritance, gladly complied with my requests. I noticed their faces tense up sometimes, but I paid it no mind. About a year later, my father's condition worsened. Though the doctor assured me it wasn't urgent, I felt relieved. However, I informed James and my in-laws that my father's condition might take a turn for the worse soon. It seemed like the news they had been waiting for, evident from their barely concealed grins. With a calm demeanor, I handed them divorce papers and said, "Thank you for all you've done. Please, let's get a divorce." James and my in-laws were stunned, but I continued with the lines I had prepared. "So James, mother-in-law, and father-in-law, you were all after my father's inheritance, weren't you?" I heard everything. Mother-in-law wanted a vacation, father-in-law wanted a new car, and James, you wanted a gaming computer, didn't you? I can't stay with people who seem to be waiting for my father to die. The looks on your faces just now were truly ugly. It's like I could see your greedy thoughts of getting money when my father passes away. As I spoke, my expressionless face seemed to frighten them. My in-laws were frozen, and James, holding the divorce papers, was in shock, opening and closing his mouth. I had no reason to stay in that house anymore. "You can send the divorce papers by mail, but if you don't, I'll get a lawyer. Please do it within a week," I told James before getting up. I grabbed the luggage I had prepared earlier and left our home. During the train ride back to my parents' house, I felt the gentle sway of the seat. When I arrived, my parents were there waiting for me. Since I had already told my mom about what happened, she hugged me tightly and said, "You did the right thing." It was the first time I cried in my mom's arms like that since I became an adult. The next day, James and my in-laws came to my parents' house. I decided to stay hidden and see what would happen. When my mom opened the door, James and my in-laws were kneeling outside. "We're here to apologize to Karen. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Please, let us apologize properly," they pleaded. "Misunderstanding? My daughter overheard your conversation. It seems you've been eyeing my husband's inheritance. I don't want to have anything to do with people like that." My mom sharply dismissed them. James persisted, pleading to see me again. "I can't let you see her because she doesn't want to. What she wants isn't your apologies, but for you to fill out the divorce papers. Have you done it? Hand them over quickly," my mom insisted. "Please just give me one more chance," James begged, but then the sound of a cane tapping caught everyone's attention from deep within the house. We all turned to see my father, leaning on his cane with the help of my sister-in-law. James looked shocked to see my father in person for the first time. With a whiteboard in his hand, my father had a message for James. It read, "I won't let my daughter stay with someone who can't make her happy. Divorce her immediately as she wishes." The message, written strongly, seemed to hit James and my in-laws harder than anyone else's words. They finally realized there was no point in arguing further. Slowly, James and my in-laws stood up. "I filled out the divorce papers. Here they are," James said, handing the papers to my mother. He promised to let me know once he filed them with the city hall. And then my mother sent him and my in-laws away. Emerging from my hiding spot, I said, "Thank you, Mom and Dad." My mother smiled gently while my father chuckled and wrote a message on the whiteboard. A father's duty is to protect his daughter until the end. Seeing those words, I couldn't help but cry. Despite his paralysis, my father remained the same kind and caring person. I had initially thought he had changed, but he proved me wrong. He was still the dependable father who always put me first. "Dad, I hope you live a long time," I told him tearfully, and he responded with a grin. Since then, James has returned to his parents' house and seems to be living quietly. As for me, I've adjusted to taking care of my father while managing work. It's a busy life. But remembering how my father always made time for us when we were young, my brother and I never feel burdened by caring for him. Despite being half bedridden and losing weight, my father's laughter and love for dad jokes remain unchanged. My sister-in-law also finds joy in caring for him, and we're able to lead a peaceful life together.
My name is Mary. I turned 35 this year on a warm summer day when birds were chirping happily. One day, I was asked to go to the president's office. The president is actually my mom. I'd accidentally called her mom instead of boss because I was surprised. She seemed annoyed by the heat and didn't even look at me when she spoke. She said she's giving the company to my sister and firing me. It was hard to believe what I heard because the sun was so bright. I probably looked really shocked. My mom, looking frustrated, finally looked at me and repeated that I'm fired because she doesn't want me around since I'm not as attractive as my sister. She said I had to leave by the end of the month. Then she went back to her work as if our conversation was over. I felt confused and hurt as I sat there, listening to the birds outside. My mom even scolded me for still being there and told me to go back to work. I walked away from the office feeling like a robot, saying excuse me as I left and closing the door behind me. Our company is pretty small, just a 2-story building, and we're in the demolition business with about 10 people working here. It's a family business, with my mom as the president, my aunt and her husband as the top managers, and my mom's cousins as other important managers, but my mom always had the most control. After I finished high school, I got a job at an accounting firm. But when I turned 25, my mom said we needed an accountant at our family business. She basically guilted me into joining, saying I shouldn't abandon my family. And when I started, I didn't just do accounting work. My mom gave me all sorts of jobs, from paperwork to sales, whenever we were short-staffed. Basically, I did a bit of everything at the company. Even though the work was tough, I tried my best not to be a burden to anyone. I worked long hours and somehow managed to keep up with everything for the past 10 years. On the other hand, my sister Lucy, who was supposed to take over the company, is 3 years younger than me at 32, and she only started working here 2 years ago. Lucy had been jumping from one job to another, always saying they weren't right for her. When she turned 30, she stopped looking for work and spent her days relaxing at home. Then, my mom decided Lucy should work at our family business and made her an executive director. Even though I've been working at the company for 10 years, I'm still just a regular employee. Everyone noticed how differently my sister and I were treated, but I wasn't surprised. My mom has always liked Lucy more, even when we were kids. She gave Lucy all the nice clothes and toys she wanted and always said how cute she was. But I got hand-me-downs and wasn't paid much attention to. As a child, I didn't understand why my mom treated us differently. I worked hard in school and helped out at home, hoping to get her attention. But even when I got top grades, she barely noticed. At one point, I even thought about getting plastic surgery because I believed that if I looked prettier, my mom would pay more attention to me. But my aunt, who is my mom's sister, saw me feeling this way and explained why my mom ignored me so much. When I was in high school, I was told that my dad had died. But the truth was, when Lucy was born, my dad left my mom for another woman from his job. This woman was older than my mom and supposedly not as pretty, but she had a similar vibe to me. My aunt told me that my mom was too proud to admit that my dad left her for someone who wasn't as attractive as she was. She seemed kind of satisfied telling me this, like she enjoyed seeing my mom in a tough spot. My aunt wasn't particularly stunning herself. She took more after our side of the family, but she was good at her job and often used her charm to get ahead. My mom took over the family business when she was 32, after my dad left. She used her looks to attract and keep lots of clients, which really helped the business grow. Plus, there was a lot of demand for demolition work at that time because many buildings needed tearing down. So my aunt's family and my cousins couldn't really stand up to my mom. Lately, the cost of getting rid of industrial waste and moving it around has gone up, and it's been hard to balance how much it costs to demolish buildings with what we actually make. Our company isn't the only one struggling, the whole industry is having a tough time. It's been a challenge just to pay our employees every month. And now, my younger sister has joined the company as an executive director, adding to the mix. I wondered how my mom planned to pay my sister's salary, but she just said, "We'll cut your pay to cover hers. We're family, so it's natural, right?" I pointed out that even if they cut my pay, it wouldn't be enough to give my sister the salary of an executive director. But my mom didn't care. She told me it was my problem to figure out. I timidly suggested that maybe my sister should start as a regular employee. My mom gave me a harsh look and scolded me, saying, "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't your business to interfere with." At that time, we all lived together. My sister didn't contribute anything to the household, while I paid $1,500 each month to help out. I've been helping around the house since I was young to support my busy mom, but my sister never did anything, acting like it was normal. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would ask when I was working late. When I told her to make her own food because I was busy, she'd say, "But I don't know what to cook. You're the one who knows the kitchen best, right?" I don't want to get in trouble for using it without asking like last time. She never bothered to try cooking. Instead, she used that past argument as an excuse to avoid doing anything around the house. So, I often had to rush home to cook dinner before going back to work. My mom usually didn't cook either. Even when I made meals, she often eat out, choosing whatever she wanted. Lately though, she was going out to eat with Lucy more, so I didn't have to cook as often. But now, we were spending more money on entertainment, which was causing new problems. My mom, who was now 63, was starting to complain more about feeling sore and the effects of drinking too much. It was around this time that I was called into the CEO's office and told, "I'm giving the company to Lucy. You, who aren't as pretty, are fired." I could understand why my mom chose Lucy to take over the company, considering her past behavior. Lucy was 32, the same age my mom was when she became the CEO. Maybe my mom thought Lucy could use her looks to get things done, just like she did. But I couldn't accept being fired because of how I look. Even if my salary went to Lucy, it didn't seem fair. When I talked to my aunt about it, she already knew Lucy was going to be the CEO, but she didn't know I was getting fired. After thinking about it, my aunt said, "I'm not sure, but it seems like Lucy doesn't like that whenever she says she'll do something at the company. Everyone says it's okay because they know Mary will help. Maybe that's part of the reason." No, it's because everyone stopped asking Lucy for help since she always does a messy job, right? Lucy was really bad at her job. She often missed deadlines, messed up phone calls, and made lots of mistakes in her work. Even though she had some experience, she didn't seem to realize how bad she was. Maybe because people always overlooked her mistakes because she was pretty, she never thought about improving. My aunt agreed, saying, "That's true. But I think Lucy sees you as a bother." She added sadly, "But I never imagined they'd fire you. Without you, the company won't be able to work properly." She seemed worried, but didn't argue with my mom because she knew she wouldn't win. I felt disgusted knowing my aunt was related to me by blood. "So basically, both my mom and sister hate me, right?" I said bitterly. My aunt didn't know what to say, so she suggested, "Well, your mom is terrible, but maybe you'd be better off working somewhere else with all your skills. It's a waste to stay here." Standing in the car, bathed in the red glow of the summer evening, I stared into the distance and felt a sense of relief. Maybe it was okay to let go. I turned to my aunt and said, "You're right," with a big smile on my face. It was the first time I'd smiled genuinely since I started working at the company. My aunt looked a bit confused by my smile, but she returned a sad smile. As I worked on handing over documents and organizing files so that anyone could understand them, the end of the month came quickly. When I went to the CEO's office to resign on time, the sound of birds was gone, and my mom and sister were happily chatting. "That sales guy definitely has a crush on you." "You, that bald guy?" "No way." They laughed loudly, not realizing I was there. When I cleared my throat, they finally noticed me. My sister looked at me curiously and said, "What's up?" "We don't need dinner tonight. I'm quitting today." "Thanks for everything," I told them. "Oh, was it today?" "I forgot." My sister laughed again. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to see them anymore. I'm moving out too, so take care, my mom replied mechanically with no emotion. I closed the door, and from inside, I heard my sister say, "Now we won't have to deal with that annoying face anymore." In my heart, I whispered, "Just you wait," and left the company I'd been at for so long. A week later, after finishing some paperwork for school, I checked my phone and saw 14 missed calls from my mom in just 2 hours. I didn't call her back because I had a bad feeling about it. I put my phone on silent and went home after finishing my other tasks. The missed calls from my mom kept piling up, and when I checked the next morning, there were a total of 80 missed calls. The last one was after 2 a.m. But I didn't even consider calling her back. She was like a stranger to me now, and I didn't want to hear her voice at all. I even had thoughts that if I heard her voice, I might end up doing what she wanted. After all, she had controlled me for 35 years. So I ignored her calls with all my strength, trying to break free from her influence. I could have blocked her number, but I thought keeping the calls might be evidence of her behavior if something happened. At first, getting almost 100 calls a day was tough, and I hated seeing them come in. But over time, I started feeling satisfied, imagining my mom's frustration with each unanswered call. It made me realize just how badly she had treated me. The year went by like this, and eventually the calls from my mom stopped. I had no idea what was going on with her. During this time, I worked part-time while studying online to become a tax professional, and I passed all the exams. I recently got a job at a top tax consulting firm. My experience in the very tasks I did at my mom's company helped me see the bigger picture, which was a big advantage in my new job. I was grateful for all the hard work I'd done at my old company over the past 10 years, especially now. The people at my new job are great, and we all work together well. It's a big change from my old job. When I was left to figure things out on my own, pushed around by my mom and sister, I spent countless nights researching and working alone. One day, while I was leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mom's company. As I passed by, I noticed the windows were dirty and the plants I used to care for were withered. On my way back, I bumped into my mom coming out of her company. When she saw me, she shouted, "Ah," and rushed towards me. Expecting her to scold me, I instinctively covered my face with my bag. But to my surprise, she spoke to me in a sweet tone, asking where I'd been and if I changed my phone. It seemed like she hadn't even considered that I might not want to talk to her because I disliked her. Given everything she'd done to me, I couldn't help but wonder about her thought process. Ignoring my confusion, she continued, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's awful, isn't it? You can start working here again from tomorrow. I'm not mad, you know. So I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please come back to work tomorrow." It took me a moment to process what my mom had just said. Did she only see me as a little child who adored her? Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm happy there," I said hesitantly. But instead of understanding, her face twisted into anger, and she yelled, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is struggling? I don't care about other companies, you belong to me, got it?" Causing a scene in the street. "Wait a minute, you're the one who fired me, remember? What about Lucy? What happened to her?" I asked. My mom snorted and said, "Oh, Lucy. I thought she'd be useful, but she got caught having affairs with 3 men from our main client. Our business with them ended quickly. I tried putting her in clerical work, but she couldn't even clean properly and was useless at accounting. Because of her, we couldn't even hire someone else." After venting her frustrations, my mom turned to me with a grin. "That's why it's your turn, Mary. Ever since you left, the office has been a mess. I need you to take responsibility." I had made a thorough handover manual before leaving and explained everything to Lucy. But I doubted Lucy had even looked at it, and I was sure my mom hadn't heard anything about it either. And even if she did, she'd probably pretend to forget. I couldn't understand why they fired me and then expected me to clean up their mess. This was typical of these women. They acted tough, blamed others, and made others clean up after them. It was their usual trick. I bit my lip, thinking of the kind people I worked with now, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't succumb to this pressure anymore. "You're the one who fired me, right?" I said to my mom, my tone changing. "And you fired me because I'm not pretty, isn't that right?" A crowd had gathered around us, intrigued by our argument. My mom seemed startled by my sudden assertiveness. "Did I say that? Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" she stammered, aware of the onlookers. No, I heard it loud and clear. You're giving the company to my beautiful sister and firing me, the ugly one, I declared boldly. I don't get it. I've been working hard at the company for 10 years, but you suddenly decide to give the company to my sister, who hardly does any work, after just 2 years. Your judgment is questionable, I stated firmly. The crowd started to murmur in response. Can that really happen? That's not fair. Are they even related? Is she her own mother? Some even started filming us, but I was too angry to care. As my mom began to sweat and pale under the accusing stares, she panicked. Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside, she urged. Misunderstanding? What's there to misunderstand? If you didn't say it, just say it clearly, I retorted. When my mom stayed silent, the people around us started saying, she's silent, so it must be true. That's unbelievable. Then something snapped in my mom. She started yelling, shut up. It's all your fault for being ugly and miserable. Ugly people should know their place and obey what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for. People around us were shocked by my mom's outrageous behavior and quickly started uploading their videos. The headlines read, Ugly woman obeys beautiful woman. The video went viral, reaching my mom's clients, who promptly cut ties with her. It turned out that in the year after I left the company, they were involved in shady activities like fraud and tampering with accounting books. When the video spread, everyone was eager to distance themselves. As a result, the company went bankrupt. My mom and sister, now without income, came to my apartment, but I didn't let them in. In the end, they moved to a rundown apartment without a bath, living in fear of creditors. My sister, always trying to take it easy by flirting with male coworkers, had trouble keeping part-time jobs because her coworkers didn't like her. Meanwhile, everyone knew about the viral video, so my mom was also shunned by her coworkers. It seems she's now silently working by herself. Meanwhile, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He's not conventionally handsome, but he appreciates my hard work and sincerity. We're planning to get married soon. I'm genuinely happy knowing that my efforts have paid off. You need to heal your hand quickly, or it will get worse. I didn't understand why my husband George took me on a fishing trip in a rowboat and let me drift away while he filmed me laughing on his phone. I thought maybe he wanted to make up after an argument. But as I drifted alone, scared and cold, I realized his true intentions. Thankfully, a man rescued me, saving my life. My name is Carol, and I'm 38 years old. I live with my husband George, who is 3 years older. We used to work together at the same company, but in different departments. We didn't interact much until George started visiting my department for no reason. Eventually, he asked me out to dinner, surprising me. We grew closer and got married 2 years ago, much to the surprise of everyone, especially my parents. They were overjoyed at our wedding. After living with my parents, George and I decided to get our own place, not too far from my parents' house. I'm home. Welcome back. Dinner is ready. Is that curry I smell? Yes, it is. Let's dig in quickly. Awesome, your curry is the best. I usually take care of the housework because I finish work on time and don't have to do overtime. Even when I lived with my parents, I enjoyed cooking and cleaning, so it's no trouble for me. But on weekends or when George gets off work early, he takes over. Our life as newlyweds was going really well without any problems. But about a year and a half into our marriage, things started to go downhill. One day, while we were eating, George sighed and said, "You're lucky, Carol, not having to work overtime." George is a manager and has been really busy lately, working extra hours. Worried about him, I said, "Well, my job is more routine, but you have so much responsibility because you're trusted, George. That's impressive." But my words seemed to upset him. "What do you mean by that? Don't praise me if you don't understand. We've had arguments before, but this was the first time I saw George so tired. Not knowing what else to say, I just said sorry, and George stormed off to his room without finishing dinner. I knew George was tired, so I didn't argue back, but I was surprised by his reaction. I heard his department was starting a new project, so I hoped things would get better once he wasn't so busy. But instead, our relationship got worse over the next few days. A week later, I had to stay late at work unexpectedly. I need to prepare some urgent documents by tomorrow, which might keep me at the office until after George gets back. Feeling a bit uneasy, I decided to text George just in case. I had to do overtime at work today. "George, if you're not working late, could you handle dinner?" Or should we eat separately tonight? Sorry for any inconvenience. It had been a while since I reached out to George like this. Remembering our last argument, I added sorry to the end of the message. But all I got was a red receipt with no reply. When I got home, George was eating what looked like a meal from a convenience store, and he didn't respond when I said, "I'm home," showing he was in a bad mood. "Sorry about dinner, work kept me longer than expected." Trying to ease the tension, George interrupted me. "Do you think it's okay to work late when I come home this tired? Are you still upset about what I said earlier? Trying to start a fight with good intentions?" I was surprised by how quickly things escalated. I asked again, "So you think I'm pretending to work late just to bother you, or I'm not finishing my work because I'm lazy?" His words stung. I really had to stay late at work. This has happened before, you know. What's gotten into you? I couldn't bear George's accusatory tone any longer. I snapped back. I work hard every day too. I shouldn't have to defend myself against these accusations. But George ignored my words. I'm already stressed from work. I couldn't bear to have this tension at home, especially when I was exhausted myself. My true feelings slipped out, albeit quietly, but George noticed and didn't let it slide. "Then just quit your job," he suggested, leaving me speechless. "It's ridiculous for you, Carol, who can't even manage housework properly, to be working. After all, I'm the one paying for this apartment. You don't really need the money, do you?" His logic seemed completely off base. Feeling my frustration rise, I unintentionally raised my voice. "How can you say that? I do take care of the house, and except for the days I work late, I handle everything at home. But lately on weekends, the cleaning hasn't been up to par compared to when we first got married. Seeing dust in the corners of the floor frustrates me. I didn't know what else to do." I felt like I was about to burst into tears. "You'd have more time to focus on housework if you quit your job, and it would be easier for you too. I'll even talk to management for you," I replied. "I don't think we should be discussing this right now." I decided to pause the conversation to give it some thought. I enjoy my job and don't want to quit, but perhaps if I supported George as a full-time homemaker, we could go back to being the happy couple we used to be. It wouldn't be wise to make such a big decision hastily. Unable to bear the tension at home, I went outside. Realizing I hadn't bought dinner, I decided to bike to the supermarket near the subway station. Riding my bike in the cold night air, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. What went wrong? Suddenly, I heard a loud horn honking from behind me and bright headlights approached quickly. Instinctively, I stopped. The next thing I knew, I was lying under bright lights and a white ceiling. Opening my eyes, I saw my parents' faces in front of me, exclaiming, "She's awake." Next to them sat George, his expression unreadable. I couldn't move my arm, and my fingers felt numb. Both of my arms were wrapped in circular casts. "This means you ran a red light on your bike," the doctor explained. I remembered now. I was on my way to the supermarket when the accident happened, but I couldn't recall if the light was red or green when I crossed. The driver was shocked too, but called an ambulance for me. The gravity of what I had done hit me, and I suddenly felt even worse. But why are Mom and Dad here? George was contacted first, and then he informed them. George gave a forced smile to my parents. Understandably, after what had happened, it was awkward for me too. "I'm really glad George was there for you," my parents thanked George, who responded with a polite, "No problem," but his forced smile didn't seem sincere. I ended up spending the night in the hospital due to the lateness of the hour. However, after undergoing various tests the next morning that showed no issues, I was discharged the following day. The doctor instructed me to rest and avoid water-related chores and housework because the casts couldn't be removed. When I got home, which happened to be on my day off, I found George lounging on the sofa with a smug look. "You really messed up running that red light, but now you have no choice but to quit your job," he said without showing any concern. George lay there, staring at me mockingly. I felt powerless to respond, and to be honest, he was right. With casts on both hands, I couldn't even type properly on a computer. Faced with the decision of taking a long break or quitting altogether, I chose to resign, thinking it might improve my relationship with George. But leaving my job didn't magically fix things between us. Instead, it seemed to make him even more dissatisfied. He'd come home just to criticize me, using it as an outlet for his frustrations. During one of my worst days, George surprisingly suggested, "Why don't we go out together? It's been a while." I was suspicious of his sudden change in behavior, but George seemed to be in a good mood that day, and his overtime seemed to be decreasing. Maybe he was finally feeling less stressed. Perhaps today we could finally patch things up. Feeling more hopeful than I had in a long time, I joined George on an outing. We went to the beach, a place we used to visit together. Here, you can fish in a rowboat, George suggested, pointing to the safe fishing area where beginners could easily fish from rowboats. This spot held special memories for me. Although I had only been here a few times, it was meaningful because George had helped me overcome my fear of the sea by teaching me how to fish. I still remembered the fun times we had here. It's not scary, it's nostalgic, I said to George, who simply replied, yeah. Having a normal conversation without any snark or arguments felt incredibly refreshing and genuinely joyful after so long. After renting a boat, we successfully got on board. Here, Carol, George said, offering his hand to help me aboard, just like old times. I carefully grasped his hand to get into the boat, being extra cautious since I couldn't use my hands to stabilize myself. Sitting down, I was reminded of our dates before we got married, which made me happy. Now we can finally get back to how we were, I thought, hoping this outing could mend our relationship. I looked at George, who then flashed a mischievous grin and kicked the boat off. "Huh!" I exclaimed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of the kick. With a sudden jolt, the boat shot out to sea, quickly drifting away from the dock where George stood. Even though I wasn't rowing, George took out his phone and filmed me, laughing and taunting, "You better heal that hand fast, or it's going to be bad." In that moment, I realized I had been tricked. I blamed myself. I had thought that if George's workload decreased and I did the housework perfectly, we could reconcile. But I was wrong. This was George's true nature. Realizing this, I felt frustrated, ashamed, and sad, and tears started flowing, sniffling and breathing in the sea breeze. I felt the fear of being alone at sea overwhelm me. I just wanted to go home. As I sat there, eyes closed, trying to push through the fear, a man's voice startled me. "Are you okay? You're about to drift out of the safe area, and are those casts on your arms?" There was a man, likely a father, and a boy who looked a lot like him, but when our eyes met, the man exclaimed, "Oh, aren't you Carol?" with a gentle voice. I remembered him. He was Matt, George's colleague who had come to our wedding. That meant the boy next to him must be his son, Mark, who had grown a lot since our wedding. I didn't notice. "What happened to you in that state? Weren't you in a bicycle accident?" Matt asked, clearly confused. "Yes, I was, and now I'm stuck here, unable to row. All because George put me on this boat," I explained. Matt seemed taken aback, understandably so. Being put on a boat by one's husband and left adrift at sea sounded like something out of a drama. "Let's call for help," Matt said, raising his voice and calling out to the boat rental staff. Thanks to him, I was saved, while Mark played on the beach. Through tears, I told Matt everything about George, how he had treated me, and how I ended up adrift at sea today. Gradually, Matt's face grew pained, and he cried with me. "It must have been hard," he said softly, offering a comforting word. I nodded, tears streaming down my face once again. Then Matt made a suggestion. "I've been having my own thoughts about George recently. Would you let me handle it?" After our conversation, Matt drove me home in his car. During the ride, Mark talked a lot, providing me with a genuinely enjoyable time for the first time in a while. I dreaded coming home, but it was unavoidable. With trepidation, I opened the front door to find George lounging carelessly in the living room. He smirked at me and said, "Wow, you're back. Always lucky with survival, huh?" Unable to find the energy to respond, I ignored him and went straight to my room to get ready for bed. The next morning, I didn't make breakfast for George and stayed in my room. With my hands in this condition, I couldn't cook properly anyway. But even before the boat incident, I had tried so hard to please George, even buying delicious bread. Now, all those efforts felt pointless to me. I didn't give George much thought throughout the day, and before I knew it, night had fallen. The sound of the front door opening signaled an unusually early return for George. He barged into my room and started yelling abruptly, "Hey. It was you, wasn't it?" Confused, I asked what he meant. George's voice grew louder as he accused me. "Don't play dumb with me. You're the one who told my company. What's going on?" I remained unfazed by his words, replying, "I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever trouble you're having at work doesn't involve me anymore. After all, I'm not even working there anymore." I waved off George's accusations, feeling no need to cater to him anymore. Frustrated, George stormed out of the house. The real shock came 3 days later when George, who hadn't returned home during that time, walked through the front door looking as pale as a ghost. "Carol, what should I do?" he muttered, looking lifeless as he shuffled into the room where I was relaxing. "What happened?" I asked. "I've been fired from my job," he said. "Oh, really?" I replied indifferently, watching as George collapsed to the floor. I had finally made it to manager. Despite his despair, I felt no sympathy for George because I knew this was coming. This was what Matt had hinted at when he said, "Leave it to me," during our conversation by the sea. According to Matt, George's behavior at work had taken a turn for the worse recently. He was mistreating his subordinates, dumping his work on others, falsely claiming overtime, and even harassing a new female employee, among other things. However, there was no solid proof of his actions, leaving them in a difficult situation. Despite being colleagues who were promoted to manager around the same time from different departments, Matt struggled to come to terms with George's behavior. But seeing how upset I was by George's actions, Matt felt compelled to take action. He suggested I check George's computer, suspecting it held evidence of his wrongdoing since George always took his laptop home. Matt couldn't investigate it himself. I knew George's laptop password. After safely returning from the sea, I pretended to go to sleep, waited for George to fall asleep, then checked and extracted the data from his laptop, which I then sent to Matt. I never expected things to unfold so quickly. Matt, the star of the advertising department, had acted swiftly and decisively. Standing up, I went to my drawer and retrieved something specific. Then, speaking slowly, I said, "I'm sorry to bring this up while you're feeling down, but I have something important to say." George looked at me with a puzzled expression, resembling a discarded puppy. After taking a deep breath, I continued, "I want a divorce." I finally voiced my decision, handing him the filled-out divorce papers. George's face shifted from confusion to a mix of anger and sadness as he looked at me. "Why do you want a divorce? Can't you show a little compassion, especially when I'm feeling so low?" he pleaded. His words left me stunned, almost tempted to throw them right back at him. "I'm grateful to you for revealing your true nature, and I've already discussed this with my family," I stated firmly. This wasn't just bravado. After my ordeal at sea, I had indeed gone back home and talked with my parents. That night, Matt messaged me saying, "George might come crying to you in about 3 days. It's up to you, Carol, what to do next." Reflecting on my options, I decided to confide in my parents. I laid everything out for them, holding nothing back, including the terrifying experience of being adrift at sea in a boat I couldn't row. As I recounted the events, the guilt I had been suppressing and the emotions I had bottled up overwhelmed me, and I cried. My parents, who had held George in high regard, were deeply shocked by what I revealed. However, after hearing my story, they apologized for my pain and encouraged me to proceed with the divorce. Though I had been considering it, their support helped solidify my decision. When I shared my decision with George, he paled and eventually broke down, pleading, "Please don't leave me. I can't bear to lose you now." Despite this desperate plea, my resolve remained firm. "You should have realized before putting me on that boat," I told George. He deflated, sitting motionless on the floor. In the past, I might have comforted him, reassuring him that everything would be okay. But now I felt nothing. My love and feelings for George had long been discarded in the sea along with that fishing boat. "The divorce is final. I won't be your convenience anymore," I declared firmly, my pent-up frustration fueling my words. With that, I left George behind, motionless on the floor. I grabbed a backpack with just a few belongings I had packed the night before and left the house. The night air was cool and I felt refreshingly clear-headed as I made my way back to my parents' home. Despite George's continued pleas to stay together, I proceeded with the divorce through a lawyer recommended by my father. In just a few days, George lost everything, sinking into depression and eventually returning to his parents' house, where even his mother seemed to have lost patience with him. His mother was entirely on my side, repeatedly apologizing for her son's foolishness. I didn't have much affection for George, but I had a soft spot for his mother, which made the situation unfortunate. I've heard he's now unemployed, staying at his parents' home. It's sad to see how he could be so harsh to others yet unable to handle adversity himself. After successfully ending our relationship and receiving support throughout the process, I expressed my gratitude to Matt. Once my arms healed, I returned to work and realized how much I actually enjoyed it. I used to spend each day accommodating George, but now I cherish doing what I love, immersing myself in my work and feeling fulfilled every day. I'm eager to start anew, valuing myself